Join us and our friends as we fall down the rabbit hole of security wonder. If you're ready to see how deep it goes, you've found the right place. Pour your tea. You're not late for office hours. And now, our Red Queen, Tarah Wheeler.
Hi, folks. It's wonderful to be here with you again today, and I am completely thrilled to be able to have my friend and colleague and just trusted mentor here with us today, Chris Cochran of Hacker Valley Media at AKA Identity. I would love to tell you more about Chris. His career is a unique journey from the disciplined world of the Marine Corps to the creative field of marketing, which is not a connection I would have made necessarily always myself. His early work in Marine Corps intelligence and the National Security Agency taught him important skills in analysis and strategy. These skills were further developed during his time in cybersecurity, where he worked with prestigious organizations, including Netflix. His experience led him to co-found Hacker Valley Media and deepen his involvement in marketing. Now, as the VP and head of marketing at AKA Identity, Chris combines his diverse experiences to excel in his role, demonstrating how skills from one field can powerfully translate into another. Chris, it is wonderful to have you with us today. Thank you so much for showing up.
I'm glad to be here, Tara, and I love that intro. It's awesome.
I'm grateful to have you here because I love the fact that your field and the way that you got here has experienced so many crossovers, so many moments where you had to translate from one field to another. And I feel like, the reason you and I are here today is because just talking about cybersecurity has got to be harder than doing cybersecurity, honestly. And I feel like one of the particular gifts that you have is you know how to talk to people about cybersecurity in a way that sticks with them, in a way that that lets them communicate with other people and feels empowered. And that is, from what I've been able to tell, basically the hardest thing to do in all of cybersecurity. I mean, like, calendaring is pretty much it. Other than that, in hard problems in computer science, like, physics and religion for that one. That's the problem. But man, communication, analogies, teaching people. How have you started to think about communicating with people in cybersecurity?
I mean, this is one of my favorite subjects of all time, is being able to communicate complex concepts to people that might not be their background, right? Because if you're looking at small to medium-sized businesses, if you're talking to the general public, if you speak like we speak on a day-to-day basis, it's going to go over everyone's head. But if you can put it in a context that makes it meaningful for them, then it makes it a lot easier. So let me give you an example. If you watch a movie and it's super confusing, you're like, I don't even know what the heck is going on. Part of the issue is that you're not able to put yourself in that scenario. You're not able to put yourself like, whoa, would I make that decision as the main character did? Or what would I do in that similar situation? If you can't even see yourself in that situation, then it's just going to go over your head. The same thing applies to communication and technology and cybersecurity. If someone just doesn't understand what you're talking about, it's going to be hard to get that message across because they won't have that emotional response. When you were talking about things stick with people, they stick with people because you have data or information and you combine it with an emotion. And it could be things like fear, it could be happiness, it could be so many different emotions that we feel on a day-to-day basis. But if you want to really have something stick, you have to tie it to an emotion at the end of the day.
I love that. And getting something to stick and just thinking about the main character in a movie. I think one of the most common ways that great movies and great stories bring us in is they give us a character we can see ourselves through. Yep. And if there's one thing that security is super bad at, it's giving people who are new to the field or who are never going to enter it but need to communicate with it a way to sort of see themselves in the story, right? There's no sort of like, there's no Frodo, there's no Harry Potter, there's no Katniss Everdeen, there's no person that people can learn about, sympathize, and watch their journey because it seems so foreign all the time. You got like shady, black hoodies, like I think I'm wearing mine today, but there's nothing to relate to there. And what have been we're going to talk a little bit more about like cybersecurity news and stuff, but as long as I've got you here, what has been your biggest success, do you think, in a time that you told a story and you watch people's faces light up? Is there something that you can think of where you just had that moment where you've helped somebody understand something and it's right there in front of you and it's a good example for other people to learn from?
Yeah, for sure. I give keynote talks quite often. And a lot of times I'll talk about everything from leadership in cybersecurity. I'll talk about threat intelligence. I'll talk about storytelling. And each time I tend to have these tenets that I tend to bring up. Tenets like if you understand your purpose and you understand your superpower, like you're basically an unstoppable force when it comes to getting what you want out of this world. But just little tidbits like that. A lot of folks come up to me after the fact is, wow, I've never heard anyone put a concept that way, or wow, I've never thought of it that way, but that's how I feel, or I've never been able to put words to feelings that I've had in the workplace, in the security program, or in certain instances that we deal with in business. So I would say that that's probably the biggest thing is, number one, opening up the scope of what I'm willing to share about my background and things that I've dealt with. Because if you can empathize with someone that's up on the stage and they're talking about things that they've dealt with themselves, that connection seems to happen. And then when that connection happens, the information that comes after that, it's more readily absorbed by the audience. So I would say the thing that is super helpful is to tell people about your mistakes, tell people about your fears, your concerns, or the things that you're thinking about. We don't have to be these robots, these cybersecurity robots, when we're up on stage or on a podcast and just spout perfection. It's better to be that human, right? Because we love human characters. I'm sure you've seen a movie where there's a main character that is just perfect, and we hate their guts because they're something that is unrealistic. But I would say that that's probably been the biggest learning lesson for me when it comes to having these communications is, number one, leaning into empathy, but then also being vulnerable about your own particular story and the things that you think about.
Yeah, when I've seen situations like that, what I often see is somebody who's the main character is unsympathetic. All of a sudden, the villain starts to look a lot more appealing. No,
I like villains. A good crafted villain. I'm a sucker for one. I tell you
I
that.
do too. When I think about how to communicate with people, I've got to call out what has got to be. I think this one's going to win a Pony Award this year at Black
Mm.
Hat for the single worst use of customer communications. It's got to be the 23andMe breach notification, where 23andMe notified the millions of its customers who had had their genetic identity stolen from 23andMe that it was their fault for reusing passwords.
Right.
I may never have seen a form of communication more likely to stop communication in a process,
Hmm.
maybe in all of cybersecurity, that didn't emit from the mouth of a government official, maybe ever.
Hmm.
Can you think
Right.
of anything worse? I can't.
I mean, here's the reality of that situation is that, I mean, they're telling the truth, right? If there are people that are reusing passwords, it's going to be easier for other folks to get access to your information. However, there is empathetic and understandable and graceful ways to bring that communication to your customers. Like, you can't say blame or you're at fault or pointing fingers. I mean, you can tell someone about the scenario and say that, unfortunately, what happens sometimes is that reused passwords get used whenever there's a breach in another application or another solution or another company. Those passwords can be used against us as well. And unfortunately, we, not you, but we were a victim of that scenario. And I think that would have been probably a touch better way of communicating that.
I have to agree on that one. It's difficult to see how that communication could have gone any better, but it really is about the idea that this is supposed to be an entity. A company's made up of people, of a team of people that you've trusted the most indelible part of your personhood to, in the form of ones and zeros. And to learn that you're thought of that way, I think that's really the crushing element there for people who got that message. I mean, the people who are using 23andMe aren't necessarily all, just techies. They're people doing ancestry research, right? They're people who
Mhm.
get to, figure out that they've got cousins they've never met before. There are people who are trying, to learn things about themselves. And
Yeah.
I struggle to see how that could have been phrased any less empathetically. And at the same time, yeah, I mean, exactly. We got one of our favorite folks from LinkedIn. Too many times, it's not what you say that matters, but how. Sounds like
Absolutely.
something my mom told me a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important. It's a really important. And I mean, I wasn't in the room whenever they wrote that message, but I would have to. I hope I can lean on uh, accepting it as like a mistake, or I don't think I don't know. Yeah, they could have meant it intentionally, but I would hope that they didn't mean to put that for that to come across like it did. And I kind of hope that they were really thinking like, hey, we need to get information out to our folks as fast as possible. And the second glance to make sure that they weren't putting the blame on other folks was kind of missed. But maybe I'm a romantic that way.
I don't know. Maybe those of us that do this job, we either have to be fully cynical or fully optimistic,
Hmm.
because either you see the kind of the long tail of all of the people that you're never going to all the way be able to help, and
Hmm.
that discourages you, or it fires you up,
Right.
and you say to yourself, I can't fix everything, but I can start with this one thing in front of me here. And for the people that I know that are profoundly compassionate communicators, I mean, you got to be among my top 3 communicators in cybersecurity. I think people
Oh,
of people
thank
like
you.
Rachel Toback, I'm even thinking of Ian
Yeah.
Mine. I get to work with that guy every day,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think of people who are compassionate and joy-filled communicators who are educators. And it's almost always paired. You're
Mm,
not just a communicator, you're always an educator if you're a communicator in this field. I
right.
married a guy who does this better than
Oh
I
yeah.
do, you
Yeah.
know?
He's one of the best in the business.
Yeah, and he does it with joy and profanity
Yes.
and empathy, and, it's the way to fucking do it, no?
Yeah. Oh, he's the best. We talk about Dave.
Yeah.
Dave is one of those communicators that I honestly I've looked up to my entire career, as long as I've known him. I mean, just his ability to communicate. He's empathetic. He's thinking about other people. He wants people to feel welcomed. He wants people to access the information. He's not standing up on a pedestal saying like, look at me and how awesome I am and all the knowledge that I have. It's no, I want to share all of this information with everyone. Yeah, he's one of the best.
I absolutely love it. I think of these great communicators, and they're all different, right? Everybody who does this does it in their own style, in their own way, in their own joy. Like Jason Scott, Text Files, right, is such an incredible archivist and librarian, tells the most amazing stories about how, he and his team have saved knowledge in places
Mhm.
that, we wouldn't think to go look for too much knowledge. And it's
Yeah.
wonderful to listen. Very different styles everywhere. But, I think it's hard because everyone has this problem. Everyone has to be an advocate for what they're doing in cybersecurity in some way or another. Not very few of us have the luxury of being an asshole in a titanium silo of excellence who's just so good at what you do that you don't have to be decent to people, and you don't have to
Right.
communicate about the value of your work. Like,
Yeah.
there's some people like that. I can think of some people like that, and their work is technically valuable,
Hmm.
but I'm not hanging out with them right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think about you ever watch House, like Dr. House?
I love House. I
Oh,
loved House.
I love House. He's one of those guys I'm like, I'll allow it, you know? He's just too good.
Oh, too good. Absolutely amazing. That whole show. And even that, I mean, the moral of the entire show of House, besides it's always lupus, or it's never
Yeah.
lupus, we're not sure which one, is what's the most important thing in his life at the end of the day. It's still his friendships and the people that he
Friendship.
loves. Literally, that's how the whole thing, ends up. It's not spoilers, it ended 10 years ago, people.
Yeah.
But that I loved that was the case, that it was the people he loved that mattered the most in the end, even if he
Hmm.
never did quite figure out how
Yeah.
to say please and thank you. Yeah, we love those characters. I wish there were more studies of how that kind of communication works. TV is just always rife with the kinds of narratives that help us give examples. Most of the time, when I'm using
Hmm.
examples, I use Star Trek. I mean, just
Yeah.
because that's what I know, and
Right.
because I can always find some parable, some story, some comparison, some example that I can get somebody to understand based on what's happening in the moment. And
Hmm.
if I can't do anything else, I can always just be like, please state the nature of the computational emergency. And then pick it back up and you start figuring out what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to. So there's two things that have been kind of really sitting on my mind. As we think about, just there's always going to be ongoing bloopers from people that don't know how to talk about cybersecurity.
Hmm.
But I'm going to ask your advice on a communication problem I have.
Okay.
Um, And then I'm going to ask, we'll do that. We'll do that. We'll do that second. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about something that I hear our clients who are managed service providers talk about. And I've heard this story again and again and again. And it is very much about communication. When I listen to MSPs and MSSPs who have, a bushel of small business, medium-sized clients, I have heard this story repeatedly, and it's crazy to me. It goes like this. A 60-person small business, maybe a professional services company, something like that, gets set up with an MSP. They get laptops issued. They get, their 365 accounts set up. They get everything working. And after 2 or 3 months, after all the shakedown has happened, they just stop paying the bill. It could be that they've gone on for a year and then they just like let it go. It could be that they were on month to month and they just didn't keep going, and they just stopped paying. And the MSP reaches out and says, "Hey, what happened to the $3,000 and all of the contracts that we've got going on right now?" And the small business is like, "Well, we already got all the tech from you that we needed, so we're just not sure why we're paying you anymore." And the MSP will be like, "But you have endpoint protection on your machines. You've got an IT help desk that we have for you. You have to stay in continuous compliance with all of your obligations if you're, in health or professional services, or you do, PCI or anything like that." And the small business is like, "Yeah, I think we're going to take a flyer on it. We're probably okay for a year or two." And those MSP, like I would struggle in that moment to not be like, "You find out how that works for you, buddy." So how do you have that conversation with somebody? Because, you're in that moment, you're an MSP and you're having this conversation with a client who's ceasing to pay you in one of the rudest ways possible. And this is repeated that I've heard this.
Right.
How do you communicate in that moment with empathy to not only advocate for yourself, but in that way, advocate for them and what they're going to need that they need, but they don't know they need yet?
I would use an analogy here. Honestly, if you think about like going to the dentist, right? So let's say signing up with an MSP is like going to the dentist. They get everything cleaned up. You're looking sharp. They do your x-rays. Everything looks great. And they sent you about your business. But this MSP will actually say, "You know what? I know you hate brushing your teeth twice a day. It's cumbersome. So what we're going to do is we're going to have someone come in and brush your teeth for you while you're sleeping. Don't even have to worry about it." And then all of a sudden, 6 months in, you're like, "You know what? I don't need that anymore." And then you just don't brush your teeth at all because you're not managing it. You got so used to someone else brushing your teeth. Now you have to do it yourself. You're just like, I'm not going to worry about it. I mean, imagine what that appointment is going to look like 6 months of not brushing your teeth. So, I mean, the same thing, everything from hygiene, right? Good cyber hygiene, data hygiene, making sure that people are getting onboarded correctly, checking out of the computers and systems, not even including what we're talking about on the cybersecurity side. But if you have someone that's covering all of this stuff for you, what you want is folks to be able to do the work that they were brought on to do. Because obviously they brought in this MSP because they're going to fill in for tasks that you don't have on your side. So that means all those folks are going to be doing work outside of that realm. But now if you have issues, if you have update issues, if you have some type of maybe even an incident or an investigation you have to go through, maybe there's a compliance issue that you're dealing with, you're not going to have that backup. You're not going to have someone that's watching your back 24/7, making sure that you're safe. So I would say that, yeah, sure, maybe everything's okay right now in this point in time, but the longer you leave things completely unmaintained, the more problems you can have in the future.
Yeah, I strongly agree on that one too. I've often given people the example of what we do with compliance, and how we operate, and a little bit like kind of QuickBooks for compliance, meaning that you can stay up to date with what your obligations are. I've often compared that to somebody who says, "Well, why do we need this all the time?" Somebody who's asked me before, "Why don't we just sign up, go through your whole process, get the checklist, and then be done with you? What do we need to stay on that process for?" And what I say is that it's like accounting in QuickBooks, like where the subscription to QuickBooks you got, but you don't get a subscription to QuickBooks. Call your accountant, get all your receipts together, and attempt to get your taxes prepared on April 14th. And then April
Right.
15th, you file it all, and then you cancel everything and tell your accountant to jump in a lake, and then you're
Yeah.
done for a year. Because all of the work had to have been done meaningfully far in advance of that for the process to work it all for you. And frankly,
Mhm.
you're going to bump up against a bunch of people who didn't think to get this done in advance.
Right.
So keeping up to date on certain things like your legal and financial obligations are very much like keeping up to date with your technical obligations. It's way
Mhm.
easier to do it if you do it in 5 minutes a week than you scramble at the deadline.
Yeah.
It's true of a lot of things, though.
Yeah, there are a lot of mixed feelings about MSPs, but I'm gonna go on my soapbox for a second. I think that MSPs are one of the most important ways that small and medium-sized businesses can stay safe and operate, period, in the world. And I put that out, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me like, "Oh, that's not true." And I said, "Well, then give me the alternative for a four-person shop that you have like three engineers and one visionary that's trying to do a product, but they can't focus on IT and security. How do they stay safe? What is their alternative?" Or, like you were saying, a 60-person services organization that maybe everybody's operational and they're doing stuff. They don't have someone that's going to be able to support them and enable them to continue operations. What do you do there? I think it's super important. So I think it's an investment, absolutely, but I think it's worth it at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's part of the cost of doing business now if you're going to have technical products that you have to use. I mean, what business is going to be able to run without email right now?
Hmm.
I'm sure there may be a few, but at the point at which you're able to run without email, then a bunch of the stuff that we're talking about in cybersecurity compliance doesn't apply to you because you're not in cyberspace. So that's the real challenge right there. I love this analogy. People quitting their MSP services is like people on psych meds who stop taking them because they don't have symptoms anymore. That's
Mm.
exactly what that is like. That's a better analogy. See, this is why we talk to everybody else, right? That's better
Yeah.
than your analogy and mine. Exactly. And they don't know what they don't know. So James Byerly just asked just asked a great question here. Always also a good friend, and good to see you, and James too. Did the MSP turn on auditing inside 365? Look, the problem there is, even if they did, would anybody inside the organization understand how to read them in order to find out whether or not there'd been an incident or not? And would they know
Right.
how to remediate if it happened? Right?
Right. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a major challenge. I was talking to somebody who I had referred them to an MSP because
Hmm.
they came to us, said, "We want to use your product." And I said, "Great, go find an MSP because I'm not going to answer your questions about password resetting. Like, I love you, but I've done that for 25 years. And now we make a thing that helps people who do services, do it better for you." And they went and they talked to a couple MSPs, and they said, it's super expensive, and I don't want to pay for the additional endpoint protection. I think we're just going to take our chances. And if we have an incident, they said we could come back to them for incident remediation. And I said, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I looked at that and I was like, I think you weren't hearing the underlying, like, sort of existential despair, like the solipsism in that comment, right? Like, it's
Hmm.
true. When the incident happens, you can come back to them for incident repair. But I was like, you don't want to do that, because the
Right.
cost of an incident is not the cost of an incident, even if it's the bill that you pay.
Hmm.
And that's what you're actually kind of building in there, is the idea that it's not just that, but honestly, you're protecting the data of a lot of people. And
Hmm.
part of doing this is part of your responsibility to the people whose data you're
Absolutely.
protecting. Right? You put stuff, we put up guardrails so people don't fall over, as opposed to just stationing paramedics everywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's how I think about it. So yeah, I think there's that responsibility, but there's also just a trouble there with communication, and the analogy is really powerful. I like that. I like the psych meds. It's a pretty good
Yeah,
analogy.
that's a good
Yeah.
one.
I've also experienced a challenge sometimes communicating with people who don't know what we do. I get to ask your advice on this one, just genuinely. I talk a lot. In fact, I actually talked yesterday in front of the US Senate about small business, about cybersecurity in this country, especially how it impacts small businesses.
Hmm.
And, in that moment, as I was talking to those folks, talking to those senators, I simplified down a bit what I was doing. I said, look, I'm here about small businesses. And I collapsed together the fact that the MSPs we work with are small businesses, right? Like, there's
Hmm.
still, 40, 50 people. And one of the challenges I often have is people will say, "So you create a product for small businesses?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "Well, I'm a small business. Can I have it?" And I say, "No."
Yeah.
And that right there might be one of my most fundamental communication issues. And what I need is like a psych meds analogy that helps me with that one. I've had people use shopping malls and all kinds of stuff like that. I've not come up with the right analogy, and maybe you've got a better one than I do. I tried QuickBooks, and
Hmm.
that has worked pretty well. But one thing a smart guy, Andy Ellis, told me a couple of days ago was never use a computer analogy to explain a computer problem. And
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. Okay, yeah, that's good. All right. And I don't know. I haven't thought of a new one yet, honestly.
I mean, one that just came to my mind, and it might not be the best analogy ever, but it'd almost be like someone that came into a store, maybe it's a camera store, and they say, "Hey, I want to buy a camera. I just want to get into photography." And maybe there's a camera up there that's like, "Oh, wow, that's the best camera out there." But the learning curve is just so steep that you'd have to hire someone to be able to operate tomorrow. There'd be a lot of training, a lot of learning that will have to go into it. Or they could get something that's a little bit more point and click, right? Something that they can just kind of pick up. It's easy to learn. You can learn it in 5 minutes and then go out into the world and start doing photography. So I would say that that's one of the issues that we find is that everyone thinks, not everyone, but a lot of people think they can do just about everything, which is true. But you have to put the time in to be able to do that thing. And so that's why whenever you have a product that needs to be managed by someone that has the wherewithal, the understanding, the knowledge, the experience to be able to make it useful, that's kind of what you're having to communicate to the folks out there that are not able to use it.
Yeah, I've had people who've said before that communicating this problem is a little bit like explaining that Honda and McLaren both build cars, but they both do two different things, and the people who own a McLaren don't drive it, but the people who own a Honda do.
Right.
Sounds pretty fascinating to me, I think. Yeah. It's hard. It's genuinely hard figuring it out. Yeah. So James says Toyota built your car, but you still need to get the oil changed and tires rotated. We do have this responsibility, and we can productize and automate and do our best, but there is just absolutely no doubt that that there is no way to get away from the fact that at the end of the day, it's a human being in one way or another pushing buttons and making it work.
Absolutely.
All right. I don't know if I'm stuck. If I am, I'll fix that in a second.
You're back now.
Okay. It's this joy-filled internet on the East Coast right now. There's a bunch of weather problems out here. Yeah, I would actually absolutely love, if you've got any additional thoughts on that, I'd be glad to hear it. I think mostly what I think about is the number of people who seem super intimidated with cybersecurity, and that I wish I could help understand what's happening.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's something that I've done pretty much my entire career, is being able to communicate these problems, these technologies, the threats, everything to people that this isn't their first language, right? Even if we're talking about most MSPs, I would say most MSPs, cybersecurity isn't their first language. I did something with Huntress a little while ago. We went on this road show. Huntress is a great company that's really focused on the 99%, everyone else in the SMB world. And we went around and we were talking to all these folks. And the more I learned from these different MSP owners and practitioners, IT is probably their first language. Cybersecurity is either new or like a close secondary language for them. And so even them that are really technically savvy, sometimes you have to leverage things like analogies. Sometimes you have to put them in a different headspace to really understand information. So for example, very, very early on, probably right after I got out of the US Cyber Command, I started writing for the Fed Bar Association, which is a bunch of lawyers. And so they wanted to understand these different attacks and what do they mean. And so I had to explain what ransomware was. And I thought, well, it was a great way to explain what ransomware is to someone. And so I said, I want you to imagine that at the end of your workday, you drive home. It's been a long day. You're just exhausted. You can't wait to get inside, kick your feet up, eat some food, and watch some TV. But when you get to your door, you put your key in and the key doesn't work. Then you notice that there is a note on your door that says, hey, in order to get access to your house, you're going to have to send 5011 Bitcoins to this address in order to get access to your home. That, in a nutshell, is what ransomware is. And it not only conveys the information of what ransomware is, it also can convey the feeling of how it must feel for an organization to be ransomware. So that's what I would say is try to put it in a context that people at any level can understand.
So, as you might notice, I am not Tara Wheeler. I'm an advanced Tara Wheeler AI.
That's
Bring this
awesome.
down because I wasn't expecting to. And Tara's working through some internet issues, but we want to carry that on because, Chris, I think you actually hit on a really good point a little while back. what was it? MGM, the casinos out
Mhm.
there, they had a breach. And when we're talking about messaging, I found this fascinating when it happened.
Mhm.
LV Ransomware Group releases their own statement
Mhm.
regarding the breach. So during that time, they actually released a very, very hackerish. Sometimes there were some
Mhm.
digs, but a detailed response as to how they did it, what they did, why what you're hearing from this organization isn't
Mhm.
the full story.
Right.
So I'd love to get your feedback on, kind of the new world of having to do messaging where you're not just dealing with regulators, you're not just dealing with your customers,
Mhm.
you might even, have to respond to your attackers' press releases. I mean,
Right.
what did you
Yeah.
think of that as someone who deals with this all day?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things about cybercrime is that it can become organized, right? So if you think about it, there are ransomware groups that not only do they have like a help desk for people to call if they're trying to figure out how to pay Bitcoin and get things situated so they can unlock their files, but they put out calls for papers where they're trying to say like, hey, who out there is doing the best cybercrime research out there or criminal research out there? We want to hear what you got, and you could win XYZ thing. They put out very similar to us. They put out requirements for hiring, right? They say, hey, we need someone that's doing this, this, and this. Reach out if you have the skills and able to do this. So now you're looking at this entire organization, and they have a reputation to protect, right? Because if you think about it from a couple of different levels, let's say, and I'm not saying that this is the situation with MGM, but let's say you're a criminal group and you really pride yourself on your reputation of once someone pays the ransomware, they'll pay immediately. And let's say that there's another criminal group that pretends that they are this group and they lock up somebody's files and someone pays the ransom and then they don't pay. The original ransomware group would be intelligent. I'm not saying that I'm on the side of the criminals, but it would be intelligent for them to do some type of public announcement, because you don't want people to think that, hey, if I get locked up by this particular ransomware group, even if I pay the ransom, I am still going to be hosed, because that is their business model. They want to ensure that, hey, if someone's going to pay us, we're going to deliver what we say, because that's what they're relying on, is that recurring revenue. So yeah, I mean, that's happening across the board. The more organized, the more business centric you're becoming, the more you're going to have to rely on things like communication.
Yeah, no, I did an article a long time ago back in the day, and there she comes, so we'll give her a second to get back in here. I did an article some time ago, it was years and years and years ago, for Tripwire State of Security, and the title was what was the title? It was the hottest technology you didn't see on the black hat floor. And it
Mm.
was kind of, a little clickbaity, but what
Yeah.
have you. And this was years ago. But the whole article was documentation. It doesn't matter the
Mm.
tools, it doesn't matter any of that stuff if you do not have, and that bleeds into the messaging part. If you don't have something
Right.
that allows people to be empowered, understand a situation and all that, you're going to have a big problem. Um, so we got Tara back now. Tara, we were discussing while you were gone, we were talking about Alf V and what they did to MGM, and
Mm.
went through some of that. But we do have a comment real quick, and I'll duck out as we bring this up and let you take
Oh,
back over here. Got a nice comment here from James again. So James, big friend of the show out there, one of our MSPs, right? We'll put the link to his company inside the chat. But yeah, not to mention, the note states that if you don't pay up, the attacker will torch your house,
Yeah.
steal your stuff. It's very,
Yeah.
it'd be a real shame if something happened to these windows,
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Exactly.
So I'll drop back
mm.
off and let you guys get back into it.
It's a
Thanks.
nice MacBook Pro you got there. It's a shame if something happened to it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
um so yeah, and thanks for your patience, folks. Like it's also just kind of a reminder. I'm in a rural area right now, and the Wi-Fi is a little bit unreliable. And your choice, kind of, as you do something like this, is, I don't know, maybe don't go do technical things in rural areas, which doesn't seem very, doesn't seem very helpful, right? Like, I think the answer is there's a whole social justice thing I can do on this, on rural access to broadband.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
hold that, but I do have a good FTC tie into that rant, which is the FTC, which does care about rural broadband. Lena Khan is one of the FTC commissioners, and she was staying at an MGM property during the ransomware attack that Alfie launched, and it was absolutely fascinating to have the people who regulate technology being impacted by the technology that they're regulating. And I mean, you love to see it. And Lena's a wonderful human being. I think she's trying incredibly hard to bring some sense of balance to what's going on. But watching somebody with that eye see what's happening during a ransomware attack and going, I know what's happening here. It's profoundly meaningful, I think. And I don't know, we got an opportunity here to bring people together on the fact that nobody fucking likes ransomware gangs. Is what we don't like.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But yeah, we were talking about how organized crime, they have to do communications just like a regular business, because if your reputation as a criminal syndicate is tarnished and people don't take you seriously, then that's lost revenue. So, I mean, just like we have to be communicative and empathetic and, kind of stand up for ourselves, the criminals are doing the same thing now.
Well, and what's more is for a good solid chunk of what we would call a criminal here, you'd call that just going to your day job in North Korea, Russia, China, some of the places where some of these like government associated hacking groups and ransomware groups are operating with impunity. They get up and do a 9 to 5, right? And they're running a chat. It's lovely to speak to you today, Ms. Wheeler. Fabulous. I'm so sorry to let you know that there's been an issue with 10% of the machines at your firm. Like that's, this is what it would be like if they were talking to me, right? It's not all like blinking skulls and wah ha ha, and I think the more professional these groups appear, weirdly, the more professional and the more likely it is that the groups or the companies that are victimized by them are likely to give them the money that they want. To pay vig, right? It is well disturbing, honestly. And that communication is fascinating to me. Buttoned up chatbots, proper websites with like, locations and stuff. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
But that's where we're headed.
I think so too. Yeah, I see comments and thoughts about how communication matters more than anything else. One of the things I just did was I just made this batch of Eastern Washington chili sugar. So I went and got Eastern Washington chilies, very tasty. You dehydrate them, I ground them up. I did my air fryer attachment for my Instant Pot, actually made a batch, like 15 pounds of chili sugar. And I'm going to go tap on some doors of some MSPs in the area. Some of the ones there's some of the ones in Seattle and around. It's a tough time to be in that business, just to say hi, see how you're doing. If there's everything we can help you with, let us know. And there's a value, I think, to human communication. And having somebody just show up at the door, hey, this is a hard time. Use this in a cocktail if you want, buddy. And there's a lot of value in that, right? Because this morning I woke up to 17 AI generated, random names. Oh God, I can fix your SEO, your ROIs, a bunch of initialisms, and that's just means email is ineffective as a communication tool for marketing.
Honestly. Oh yeah, it's getting really, really rough to get any type of traction via those means, especially if it's automated. But yeah, the more human touch type of situations, I've known folks to do handwritten cards. Like I think even though that's like a length away from seeing someone in person, that's still a human touch. A human being like wrote down, took the time to write a note and say something nice. But you see these emails that are just cold outreaches. It's like, hey, let's jump on and go through a demo. It's like, you need to build a relationship when it comes to business, because I say this all the time. People do business with people they like. And if I don't know you, I probably don't like you yet. So, that's just something you got to think about.
I appreciate that absolutely so much. And looking at that, even if in that moment you don't establish that relationship, you have that open line of communication for people to reach out. And I am going to tell you right now, in May of this year, speaking of the FTC, when the new breach disclosure notifications come into effect, you're going to see a bunch of people flailing really quickly. And in that moment, Chris, will be floods, veritable planets of email, all assuring you that whatever company can solve this problem and they can fix your situation and get you back there again. I genuinely don't think that that's going to be the case. I think that the FTC breach, we've talked about this a few times before, but if you are a non-banking financial institution in the United States, and that means anybody who, offers credit because you're a construction company or, car sales or whatever you do, accounting, it doesn't matter what, you're going to have to report a breach to the FTC within 30 days, and there's no boundary on the size of your organization. It doesn't matter if you're 3 people. And
Right.
there's going to be a lot of businesses that are going to be shocked to learn that at last the rules apply to them. Shocked.
Yeah, they're gonna have to get their stuff together. And I mean, that's stuff together from a technological perspective, from a process perspective, communication. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, people are probably just thinking, oh, wow, I have to do this in this certain amount of time. You have to get to that point. So you have to prepare now to just have all your ducks in a row in case something bad happens.
Absolutely. And if you don't have it in a row, it's going to be fascinating to watch how people are going to start thinking about it. A couple people have asked me, well, isn't the FTC language about discovery of a breach? Well, why don't you just turn off all your monitoring equipment? Why don't you turn off your ADP? And this is good logic in the small to mid-sized business world. It's excellent logic. If you don't know about it, you can't be forced to talk about it. Now, of course, the problem is that most of the if you're lucky, you're the one that discovers that you've been breached. The problem comes when your discovery of your breach happens because somebody that isn't you tells you, and it's usually not the good guys when that happens. So I don't know. We're going to see how that works, but a lot of people are like, we should just stop learning as much about our business in order to prevent that from happening. Right. And I don't know that that's a good solution either. I think it's sometimes the technically legal solution is neither what's best for your business nor, long or short term, I think. Really genuinely. I haven't seen a way to get around that situation, mostly because I think people they're so overwhelmed right now. And they want some good news. Like 2024. I mean, there's nothing exciting happening this year, right?
If only there were organizations designed to help people with their IT and security stuff. Wouldn't that be nice? That'd be nice.
It'd be great if that was the case, and I think that's genuinely not. I mean, like, I'm sitting here right now and I have a little snippet of email going in the background right now. And somebody named Renee wants to give me a list of people who want to buy cyber insurance. And right after that is somebody named Marshall who wants to give me a list of people who can get me into accounting firms. And I look at that, and this noise is absolutely constant. And the only thing that I've ever found that breaks through the noise is the power of a really, really good story. I think that's it, honestly.
That's
a great story.
Storytelling is everything. Storytelling is everything.
We've got a demo environment set up for Red Queen for our compliance product. So MSPs can come in and see, like, how do I see all of my clients? How do I look at what their individual issues are across? And our organizations, like the test organizations in there, are all named according to characters and situations in Alice in Wonderland, because obviously.
Right.
Every single time I get on with like a potential client, I'm talking to them. I'm like, this is how you see, here, imagine that you had like this trucking company and this, this legal firm and this salon, and it's called March Hair Salon and Spa, and it's HAIR. And every single time I do that, I go, I did that. And everybody, people, they light up at a story.
Yeah.
They don't light up at ones and zeros,
Right. 100%.
March Hair. So I'm just never going to stop laughing at that one. I do like my dad jokes. It really is the power of a story. We are, down the rabbit hole for this year. So I don't know. If you were going to give service providers, I mean, you talk to everybody. You're at RSA, you're at Black Hat. You get a chance to meet the Illuminati of this industry. And I think sometimes there's this fear from the smaller half of American businesses, like, oh, I don't want to bother, like, the amazing famous people. Chris, you are one of those amazing famous people. And if you had to, well, of course, obviously, like I'm saying that, that's just true. You don't need it. It's not a compliment. And so you'd know if it was a compliment, it'd sound way more awkward. So the challenge I wonder is, imagine that some of these folks got a chance to come and talk with you as they kind of do now. What is the advice that you would give them in this moment? What is the most powerful security story you've ever told or heard told when it comes to these folks who are in a position of service providers for small businesses?
Yeah, a couple things there. The most powerful security story is one where you can put people in the hero position. Because when you think about it, when you think about a lot of old school cybersecurity marketing, a lot of it was this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, this FUD. But if you can tell a story where you put the person that you're telling the story to in that hero's position, and you don't make it about you don't make it about your money, you don't make it about the deal, but you make it about them being the hero of their own story. That's the most powerful thing that you could tell anybody. People can sit and listen for hours about themselves. So if you can put them in that hero's story and you're just a small portion of it, I think that is the most powerful story that you can tell. When you ever, even if you're inside an organization and you're a part of the security team, the best thing you can do when you're talking to the board is put them in the hero's position. I've done this tactic a million different times because, number one, it's a good person thing to do. It's a human thing to do. But then also you put them in a headspace where they can already see themselves as the hero. They see what you're trying to accomplish, and then you work together to achieve that solution. That is the most powerful thing you could ever do.
That's amazing. I'm just sitting here thinking about how to tell that story right now, like trying to put us in a position where, I'm not Samwise, I'm the rope,
Mhm.
right? I'm not Captain Picard, I'm the communicator, right? Like this thing where we go, like, look, we're here to be a tool for you on your hero's journey. We're not here to make you part of ours. I
Mhm.
wonder if that's one of the flaws I see in, like, the storytelling I see coming out of companies like Elon Musk's company and stuff like that. And some of a little bit more sort of the sort of like hero at the center of that company instead of making it about the people that they're serving. And I wonder if that's why sometimes that message turns some folks off, and why I find it so
Mhm.
powerful. I see companies say, look, we're here with a vision of empowerment, not, domination, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
for instance, on the AKA identity side, we went through a very intense branding, messaging exercise. And when we got to the conclusion, I'm a huge, huge Marvel fan. I love Marvel. And actually, one of my favorite characters is Iron Man. I actually was just at CES and got to sit and listen to Robert Downey Jr. talk about consumer identity, which was surreal. But what I'll say is, we decided that, hey, we're not Iron Man, we're Jarvis, right? On the AKI identity side, we are the folks that give the context, the information, the support to the heroes, which are our customers. And so that's how we look at the relationship between us and the rest of the world. If you come up and you're saying you're service centric, you come up, you say, hey, I'm here for our customers, and that's the most important thing in the world, then you have to come at it from a service centric mindset. You can't be the hero. The customer at the end of the day is the hero.
I love that so much. And that concept of heroism, it's everybody wants and needs to be that hero in their own organization, in their own mind, but also in their organization, right? Like being able to say, look, here is a problem that we know is going to happen, and I've solved it in advance is a powerful one. It's hard to do that. And I don't hate your choice of Iron Man as your favorite Marvel character. I don't hate it. Hang on for a second. Let's look at this one. I think I'm always going to love the Hulk. I'm
Really?
always absolutely, I am. I thought Mark Ruffalo did a wonderful job
He
in the
did
movie.
good. Yeah.
He's fabulous, he's compassionate, it's a wonderful story, and, it speaks to it's the Jekyll and Hyde story, right? Like, the comic
Hmm.
books is a continuation of the oral tradition, myth-making, fairy tales, right? And, The
Hmm.
Incredible Hulk is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the classic Robert Louis Stevenson story, and it is about fighting with the creature inside of you that's trying to get out and do wrong, right?
Hmm.
That's what's so interesting and powerful to me about that story, and how this mild-mannered physicist
Hmm. Yeah.
stomps and smashes, and how we all have that potential inside of us, and how we come to bring that balance in ourselves
Hmm.
is it's a wonderful and powerful story to me. I don't know if it has anything to do with cybersecurity, just it speaks to me, maybe.
Yeah, and I'll explain why Iron Man's my favorite. So similar to what you're thinking about the Hulk is, when you look at Iron Man from the very beginning in 2008 was when he had his first movie.
So
Very
good.
egotistical, brilliant, kind of a jerk, right? But then his story arc kind of continues, and the more his story arc continued, the more it became about other people, right? He was upset with Captain America because he said, hey, we said we were going to lose together and we didn't. We all just disbanded and we left each other kind of to hang. And then at the very, very end, and spoiler alert for folks that haven't seen it, I hope you have, but the end of Infinity War, Endgame. I mean, talk about being selfless and focused on the rest of humanity, the rest of the community. So I would say that's why he's my favorite.
I love that. I mean, we really do. It really is the power of a story, right? Like, hell, you sit in a broadcast like this one, and as soon as we start talking about superheroes, everyone's like, oh, I got an opinion. I wasn't going to talk when it was cybersecurity. But we're talking about Marvel. I got an opinion. Yeah, and it's true. Jarvis isn't given the credit he is due. And frankly, Paul Bettany was absolutely outstanding in that role. He would be able to do the cool stuff. I love the idea that you're putting yourself in the position where you're like, look, all I have to do is know that is for me, myself, to know that I was there and I made it work. When you're the person providing that product so the hero can get the job done. I love that. All right. We're going to sit here and talk all day long unless I ask you the question that I get to ask everybody at the end of this conversation, which is for somebody who's, by the way, you've done every job already. So this is going to be a good question for you. If you weren't doing this, if this wasn't the thing that you did and money was no object, I've heard people give every answer imaginable, like blacksmith, ship captain, astronaut. What's the thing that you would be doing instead with your life?
I'd be a social neuroscience researcher.
Okay, you got to give me more than that. Come on. I love it. More.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got obsessed with this concept because I was thinking about attention, and not attention like ADHD, which I have, but more of attention. Like, we need attention as human beings. Like, when you're young, if you don't get attention, that you get sick, you can even perish. But attention also goes to extremes. You become an influencer and you have millions of followers. What is that attention do to the psyche? And I couldn't find what that study was or what that field of study was. And so one day in the shower, I was like, if I had this field of study, these are the studies that I would do. And I was like, did I just invent a science? And so I took all that information, I dropped into ChatGPT and I said, what field of study is this? And they said social neuroscience. I'm like, get the hell out of here. So there's a name for it. And there are like 5 premium books out there in the world about social neuroscience. And I bought every single one of them. And it's fascinating. The first thing I read was this, and this is a tenet for everyone to take home to use in your life, in work, cybersecurity, you name it, is that there are 4 interactions that people have. There is a selfish interaction, which is I win, you lose. There's a altruistic interaction where I lose, you win. There is a spiteful interaction, which we both lose. I'm taking everybody down with me. And then the last one is mutual, right? I'm going to give to you, but it's also going to benefit me. And if we looked at business, if we looked at marketing, if we looked at our daily interactions as mutually beneficial to the people that we're interacting with, the world would be a much better place. And so I'm fascinated with how the mind works when it comes to people interacting with one another. And so I'd go deeper into that.
That's great. I absolutely love that. Let me know when you start that doctorate. You want to do some work on that one right there. At least you'll have a built-in set of alpha readers for your research. I love that. I love that concept. I love it for you. And you're very thoughtful about how you approach the process and the power of having the audience you have. And it's part of the reason I loved having you here. I feel like I just learned a great deal, and that now I get to figure out a way to translate what we do in a new and meaningful way. And I like learning live, honestly. Why not? Like this.
Yeah, why not?
I get to learn from cool people every week. So like all y'all out there, just, it's great and everything, but I get a chance to ask questions that are really important.
Right. That's
so
secret
Chris.
code.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to say before we finish up today?
Just thanks for having me on. Everyone have some grace and empathy for everybody out there. And we'll have to do this again.
We absolutely will. Chris, thank you so very much. Thanks so much to your team and to everybody that you know. And thanks to ours and Ian for saving me in the middle of hotel Wi-Fi. This was joy-filled as always, folks. Have a truly wonderful week. And oh, by the way, Bruce Schneier will be on with us next week. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a wonderful week. Bye just for now.